Is recording?
Now it is. So hello, here on the occasion of Sofia Art Week, edition 4, Future Articles. I'm very glad to have on the other side of the line, Karol Radziszewski from Poland, from Warsaw. He's known to our art scene in his various participations, once at Sofia Art Week, Sofia Queer Forum, excuse me, and other participations in other events and contributing to our art scene here. I would very much like to, I would make a small introduction for the ones who don't know Karol. It's a visual artist and, to my feeling, also an activist running an immense project that is dealing with Queer Institute and archiving. And this is mainly why I would like to talk to you today, to perhaps give you the word and tell us maybe something that I missed about where is your practice going, heading, and how did you start doing the queer archives, and more specifically about Eastern Europe and the region.
Okay. Hello, thank you for the invitation. It's really nice to be here. So regarding Queer Archives Institute and the beginnings, it's more like I heard a lot of times in many countries I was visiting, if it was Belarus or Ukraine, and also Poland before, that something like this never existed here, which means homosexuality, or in a wider perspective, queerness. And it was a lot of topics how this sodomy will come with the European Union to some countries of the so-called East. And that was my personal kind of response to that, to prove that these things, these situations exist before. And since I started to run the queer magazine, the magazine, in 2005, many stories, interviews, and things were coming up. And in 2015, I decided to kind of make a frame for all these recordings, archivings, and talks, and to call it Queer Archives Institute as an umbrella for all the activities I was doing around that research. And now it's an ongoing project that it's growing and growing. It's a collection, it's activities, shows, presentations, and many stuff.
Right. Great. And what about the archives? You did that so much archiving the past. And what do you think these archives, and what is the future of archiving in general as a practice? How do you see that, and where this information is drawn in, coming from, or is it always from stories being told or visuals? How do you relate to, like, what kind of stuff you consider as an archive? Like, what kind of physical and non-physical data you're dealing with when you work with archive?
Yeah, it's a lot of issues altogether, but I also, when I decided to create this project, I realized that many things that I was doing myself in the beginning of 2000 were already treated as a history for the younger queer kids. So I experienced during my life that many things already become a history and archive. So I started to treat this category of archiving and archive in a very wide direction. So perspective, like it's much more than just focusing on the Soviet times and communist era in Poland or neighbor countries. It's now coming also for more contemporary times. And I think this is the future, if I would say. How for me, the biggest question is how we can use the archive in a way that they will influence what will be in the future and how we perceive the contemporary times. So many of my activities are dealing not only with archiving or collecting, but also how to queer the existing narratives, historical, political, especially in Poland. And I think it's similar in some other countries like Hungary. The history become a very important part of the government propaganda, very homophobic propaganda. And these nationalist movements and nationalist governments are willing to tell their own stories imposed on the society, in the education, in the books, in the official narration, the way how the money are distributed to build and create the books and stories. So I decided to collaborate with many people, academics, friends, writers, artists, researchers, to build this queer narration, or to point out the people and stories in the official main, not official, but in the historical main narration that could change the perspective. And I'm constantly saying that what I'm doing now and why I'm considering myself activist, it's not only because I'm marching or signing petitions, but also I'm trying to influence what will be in the 5, 10, 15 years from now in the books, what will kids will learn and how they will be growing up with the knowledge. So that's my kind of goal and performative aspect of dealing with the archives. I would say that they have to work now, not only be collected in the vitrines. On the other side, it's also a very physical collection. The core, it's the oral history. So I'm traveling around the whole region of Central Eastern Europe, coming back for many times for some particular countries like Ukraine or Croatia, recently Ljubljana in Slovenia. And I'm recording interviews with the older representatives of LGBTQ generation, LGBTQ community and older generation, to get the stories, to get the materials, also to have some traces of the stories that are in the particular magazines or zines that could help me to understand. Because what is a bit different from what I'm doing than, because to be clear, there is a lot of activists and people, maybe not a lot, but in every single country there are some people who are trying to collect the queer history and narration. But what is maybe different with me, that I'm trying to look at that as a whole, not as a nationalistic, national way of telling the story like Polish queerness, but as the whole region, like a queer nation, queer over the borders. This is very important for me. That's why sometimes I'm a bit artificial, or very, not artificial, like maybe on just some very basic layer of knowledge of queer lives in particular country. But when I'm showing all this material together through the exhibitions or lectures, you have a bigger picture of how it works, how one movements were influencing others, and so on. And by doing that, collecting the stories, working on it, I'm also gathering a lot of physical material, zines, Xerox, particular books, photographs. I'm very interested how, especially how the visual aspect of queerness was functioning in the past, and how it could be used now, and not only in the 20th century, but how we could use, for example, 17th century graphics presenting, for example, Polish and French King Henryk Walezy, who was openly bisexual, or we could even say that he was a cross-dresser, but he was also Polish king. And for me, using this historical material and saying that's a part of the queer history and part of the Queer Institute, it's also a way how we could influence the institution, museums, public spaces, and the collections that already exist by pointing out, oh, this is queer, this is ours, this is not the way you are presenting that. So this is also a lot of interventions that are coming from the work I'm doing, and sometimes it's really changing the way the collections are presented.
That's incredible. Yeah, it's a lot of layers, I guess, I imagine. And then especially to point out again some very important two things you said just now. One was like, who are the voices who write history, and especially queer history, which are allowed sort of, or who's telling the, from which perspective, and how do we redirect the perspective in order for the future to be like a free zone of human existence somehow. And the second thing that is really would like to ask you here is what you said just now, that actually was very beautiful and slightly idealistic, because yeah, queerness beyond borders in terms of like, yeah, this is something that is kind of opening up, but then again into the context of the of kind of restricted zones. And especially I stumbled across, and not only stumbled across, but we all heard about Poland as a kind of, you know, a center in Hungary, forming up, you know, a coagulation of, you know, of power against the community, and using that for sort of, you know, deafening voices, and not even, but restricting physically in our daytimes the space, the physical space, cities who are trying to be turned, you know, in LGBT-free zones. And something came across here that you participated, and also to talk a little bit about this inserted idea about the media manipulation. And then there is this article in a blog magazine about the situation in Białystok, or how do you pronounce it?
Białystok.
I would love to ask you, because you were more active and part of this fact fighters team, and what happened there?
Yeah, it's really a recent story, because the exhibition opened around 2 weeks ago, and Białystok is my hometown. So I was born there and grown up, and I just left this city when I was 19 to study. So for me, it's very emotional also being invited to this show. And the exhibition is an international group exhibition dedicated to the roots of the anarchism that was apparently very strong in Białystok in the beginning of 20th century, 1902-03. And as a contemporary comment on this history of anarchism and very radical answers for the repression of the especially working class at that time, the curators invited few contemporary artists to present how this kind of, to testing also how this kind of politics and anarchistic energy could function in our times. So I present a project Fact Fighters, which is very old project of mine from 2007, and it was a very important project for me when I come out, because in 2005 I made the first openly gay exhibition, The History of Poland. So this history is also very short, I would say, but still it's 15 years. And then at the very beginning I was very explicit in the way I was working. So this Fact Fighters project was the fictional gay gang that was documented through the videos and photographs, and the idea was to express all the fears and wild fantasies of the society, homophobic society, about how they imagine gays as very violent, masculine guys who are raping their kids, fathers, sons, and so on. So I was kind of visualizing all these dark, crazy fantasies. And the significant aspect of the gang were pink masks wear by the members of the gang. It was 2007, so it was 2 years before the Pussy Riot. And now many people are thinking that it's kind of also in relation to this movement, but it was something different at that time. But anyway, it's the first time after 14 years that I got back with this project to Białystok. And my idea was to present how because 2 years ago, there was the first and the only equality march going through the Białystok. And it was very violent. The kids were beaten. One teenager had the arm broken, and it was really terrifying. And it happened that I was there. And I usually, when I'm going to the Pride or March, I'm not taking my camera, maybe just the iPhone. But this time I thought, oh, it will be something really interesting for my Queer Archive Institute. So I will take the camera to film my hometown doing first time Equality March. And it happened that I get to the worst part of this. So I was able to film the violence, and my recordings were used by the police to actually catch some of these people. It was also for freelancers for the TV. So what I did for this exhibition now, I edited this material, but mixed with the fictional short parts showing the gay gang, fact fighters, and with the slogans on the people that saying like, if we will catch you, we'll rape you, fight back, we will, there will be revenge and stuff like that. Plus graffiti and photographs made on the set in Białystok. And the right-wing and nationalist press was furious about it. They get crazy because they started to also manipulate, and they started to present this show, my installation particularly, in a direct way. They said it's like a heterophobia and Christianophobia, and they said that I'm a pedophile because I'm using the words boys and so on. So they couldn't believe that somebody could visualize their fears in such a realistic way. So they thought it's like the best opportunity to them to make a scandal. And actually a few days ago, the Christian foundation called Fido's Defenders, they accused me for breaking a law, and they are trying to make a trial. But I'm not sure if it's gonna happen, but this is what happened, and a lot of hate in internet and so on. But because of that, there is a big debate. And maybe what I wanted to point out, finishing this long statement, that I would never do that if I would be 20 years old, something living in Białystok, because I would be really afraid that they will hurt me and that they will do something to my parents or so ever. But because I'm 40 and I'm living in capital and I'm not there, and I work with this topic for 15 years now, I felt that this is just exactly right moment that I can use my privilege and position of being, established artist in the capital of Poland, in Warsaw, to do such a thing. And I feel quite safe. I spoke with lawyers and with the curators and so on. So I think it's also a very interesting moment that the project that is old is resonating in the scale that was never resonating before. But in the same time, I'm not afraid. It's just like a statement, like a fight back literally in the face of the government.
Yeah, that's incredible, and that's great, and that's big, and it is somehow such a area that we are all stepping in from one side or another, and how our voices are appropriated to be, the trigger for that. And I'm very struck for what this parallel time you just did, what you said about that anarchists were, at the beginning of last century, kind of the active group, and now it's the artists. But have we replaced anarchism for what it is, or what is actually our belief in that? Are we just fighting something that we don't agree with, that what we do, the way we've been represented in the society or in a groups of society, religious groups, or on all orientations, or morality, or nationalism? Or what else is there for us to fight apart of the obvious?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very interesting time for good and bad, and also in Poland, Polish art, because some years ago, this topic of LGBT rights and homophobia was not that present. If you hang the rainbow flag 7 years ago or 8 years ago in Poland, nobody cares, because most people would not recognize it as a symbol. What's changed now, because of the openly homophobic speech of the government and politicians, the rainbow become for them as a swastika, how they are presented this, like a toxic and murder ideology. But what happened, people started to recognize this symbol. And for example, my personal fight, I never used rainbow in all my career and art, because I'm searching for very particular names, traces, symbols, colors, and I consider this is more queer, also avoiding this rainbow colonization from the West, especially from the States. So this is something that I fight for. The other thing is also the way how we can be finally more rebel, or more, how to put it in words. Recently in Poland, we have more brave activists who are not only fighting for the gay rights or marriage or equal rights in a peaceful way, but rather trying to provoke actions on the streets, and not rather not artistic actions, but activist actions with a very strong response from the police. And the other activists are afraid of this movement because they think we still have to beg for the mercy or for the rights. So I would say that it's also important to see our own community in art, and but also in activism, and see how this more radical methods could be used, and that not always we have to be seen as nice and positive. We can be just ourselves, and this is still a big fight, and also a big way to explain for the younger generation that could function in a different way.
Yeah, so is kind of the protest art, or the is that forming a kind of a new aesthetic, or this aesthetic is already being known and being always part of the language, visual, and our art language that we've been using to kind of fight and make ourselves visible and recognized as something else than what we've been described as. Maybe towards the end of our conversation, just to ask you more about this thing that just happened in another city of Poland. It's more towards the art area, going back in the gallery Labyrinth. I think you were part of it too, in Lublin.
Yep.
Yeah, and can you tell more about this alliance of artists that you're now, how you organize together? Do you get together to kind of to point out a common goals, or everyone is working more on their line from their own way of startup point? And how is that radiating to come up to all the slogans of, this manifest that is coming from Poland now, that LGBT plus QRs won't be silent. And I think it takes more than, it's a group, it's a whole, it's a nest, it's something that's erupting. And I'm just curious about, how do you guys communicate, and how do you organize yourself in terms of putting, your goals, your aims together, because there is so much to address, to do in that area, like perhaps more than in a sleeping society like in Bulgaria, where everything happens between closed doors. As long as you don't speak about it, the violence and it's still a lot of violence, but it's more passive aggressive, where Poland, it is another way of interaction in that, I think. But it can always be switched, and anyway, it does switch all the time. But I think right now it's just so hot in Poland that is just like a big example of how this thing can change all the face of European, yeah.
I think it's connected with what I said before, that there was, when we get to European Union and democracy was growing, the people were still homophobic, but they were not talking about it that much. And now what's changed, that we have the government that really want to polarize people. So every statement, it's more visible, more harsh, and this homophobia is open, present, and that's why there is a lot of this very visible actions and aggression. And I don't think that it's worse now in the terms of the law or anything, because that didn't change. It's more like the visibility, and so the whole goal is to take back and to show this visibility. And I also would not say that we are like really united and as a group, but there are much more individual voices that are visible together through the shows, through some actions. So many people are working individually or small groups, but then there are some events that you could combine these forces. And in the galleries, sometimes it's happened. In Labyrinth, it's definitely a good example, because first there was my show and one artist, and then there was a group show dedicated to all LGBTQ expression. And then there was people who are visiting the show, regular people bringing their own slogans and works. So it gives the space for people to have a dialogue, and that's kind of growing as a visibility. Unfortunately, the director of the gallery is losing his job because of these shows, because not all the directors of the other galleries are brave enough to make a strong statement, but it's happening. And then there are articles and petitions, and it's constant fight. So I would say that it's a very interesting moment for the rest of the society, that they could see a different positions, and for the first time they see this LGBTQ topic is every day present in the media. So it's like a very fast, I would not say a revolution, but the very fast lesson for the whole society. They could choose if they are against or pro, but at least they have more information now because of the activities of so many people.
Right, exactly. Great. What I would like to ask you before we finish is like, so now our identity and the queer art is so much based on the struggle and the impossibility and the fight. And what if there was not the fight? What for you would be the future of the queerness, the future of queerness? How do you see it?
I know that this fight and this struggle is occupying media and the discourse. This is also a big problem for the younger artists, because sometimes they just want to express their identity and it's hard for them because everything is in this fight. But it was also a problem for me, because for the last years I was really more quiet, I would say, focusing on archives and the stories and doing my job, not hiding, but rather trying to be more focused. And then they wake me up somehow, so I get back with very provocative, explicit projects. But I believe in queer kids, and I see so many young artists dealing with queerness that never ever before. And the future is non-binary, the future is trans, the future is full expression without really these borders that even the older gay and lesbians are trying to impose on the queer community. So I see still some positive results of this pressure, because people say they want to be themselves, and they don't want to say, they don't want, especially the very young generation, what they are saying is, we don't want to be sorry for anything, like sorry not sorry. And that's the future, I think.
Totally, you nailed it. I think that's it. I really love to finish with this, because this is such a reminiscence of all the past and all the possible futures. We're sorry, but we are not sorry. It's just, it's human nature. It's where we stand, and yeah. I would very much to thank you, and very happy, and I will wish to you a lot of power and courage to go on with all these fantastic things and initiatives and work you're doing, and that we meet soon again.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It was great to talk with you, and also good luck with your job. And I think also Bulgaria will be changing faster than you think or people think.
Yeah, hopefully. Great. Okay, I'm gonna switch off this recording now.